Looking for a few tips when working on GM vehicles? In this video, we'll go over a few tips on GM vehicles that we've gained over the years from other automotive techs. Now we'll get on to tips from a tech. So this is from where we try to get that institutional knowledge from other technicians. You know, that weird stuff that you might not think of if you don't normally work on this brand, right? So maybe you're a European tech and you've only worked on Volkswagens the whole time, and then a Chevy rolls in the shop and you're expected to fix it. Well, if it's got a weird problem that you might not have seen before, or there are some things in here that we're going to talk about that are kind of a be aware of when you're working on this, even at some routine things. It might not necessarily be as straightforward as you would expect, and that's why we try to gather this information to try and help everybody out, as we go through this. So the first one, this has been a hot topic for a few years, because this can cause issues with the vehicle for sure. So this is 18 through 23 Equinox and Terrain brake service. And what happens is the vehicle may present with a code, a C code, chassis code, service park brake message in the driver information center, and the park brake will not learn after a rear brake service is performed. If the first steps of rear brake service instructions are not followed, this may result. The brake fluid level in the master cylinder reservoir must be at half or lower to allow sufficient space for the fluid to return to the reservoir when the rear caliper retract is commanded. So you command it with a scan tool and it'll retract them. The caliper will retract when commanded, but will stop when the reservoir is full, so the piston may not fully be retracted into the caliper, depending on how much you have. If the piston is then manually pressed the rest of the way, which I'm sure some people will do, so the caliper can be reinstalled, the excess fluid pressure will damage the pressure sensor in the electronic brake control module, and it will cause the electronic brake control module to fail, and the only repair is to replace it. Due to the nature of this damage, it is not under warranty, and aftermarket tools can cause this issue as well. We have had quite a few calls in the customer care center saying, "Hey, your scan tool broke my car." Well, it's not the scan tool. Sorry to tell you, it's not the scan tool's fault. It's actually the GM tool would do the same exact thing. It's actually, if you want to blame anybody, I blame GM for making it that fragile, but kind of is what it is. So it's something you need to be aware of on these vehicles. If you're doing a rear brake service, make sure that that fluid level is below half when you're going to retract the calipers. I'd say even less, because maybe you might want to service the brake fluid at the same time, right? So it's just so we're not buying a new electronic brake control module because we cause it to fail, right? So I say that just that one tip right there, that's going to save a ton of headaches for some people. Another one. So this is on wheel bearings, right? So on a wheel speed sensor on Acadias. So on some vehicles, the following DTCs or symptom codes may set, a bunch of C codes. In addition, the following lights may be illuminated: ABS, service traction control system, and/or service stability track. This may be caused by bits of ferrous magnetic debris stuck to the wheel speed sensor magnetic encoder ring. These vehicles use a speed sensor encoder ring with north-south magnetic pole pieces encased in a nitrile rubber ring, typically brown in color. This ring is a part of the wheel bearing. So in the wheel bearing, in order for it to sense the wheel speed, it has that encoder ring, which has a bunch of magnets in it. And what does it say? Ferrous material, ferrous magnetic debris. So ferrous means iron, iron and magnets, they stick together. So if experiencing any of these symptoms, the ring may be cleaned using a soft nylon bristle toothbrush or equivalent. If any debris still remains, a mild soap detergent may be used. Wipe dry. Use care to prevent damage to the wheel bearing seal. It's important not to use any kind of magnetic tool to remove this debris, or the encoder may be damaged. So if I first thing to think of, oh, there's a bunch of metal on here, metal shavings, I'm just going to use my magnet to pick it up. It's going to screw up the magnets inside the encoder. So we don't want to do that. And then GM has this really excellent picture of what that might look like. That is like seriously photoshopped, if you ask me. But that's kind of the gist of what you're going to be trying to find. You're going to find some uh, rust, things of that nature sitting in here, metal flaking, etc. in there, and it's going to it's going to cause the sensor not to read the wheel bearing. Now, of course, we could also check before we take things apart and see how well it's reading by using guided component test as well. So this is an example of what a guided component test would look like on a good one. Doesn't have any dropouts. It would look you might get some fuzziness. You might have some lower looking square waves in there as well. That's really high level talk about this, but you could actually go in there and use guided component test to verify that as well. Here's another one that technicians gave to me as well. So this is on a diesel. These are on the diesel Silverados and Sierras, L5P, L5D engines. And you could have multiple codes, fuel rail, low pressure, fuel pressure regulator, injection quantity too low, fuel pressure regulator, etc. All these different codes could be caused by the electrical connector on the fuel pressure sensor. Fuel pressure sensor electrical connector. So we can see right there, maybe necessary to use a terminal test kit with dielectric grease on it to apply and drag each terminal a few times. So that's pin tension in that. So if we do have a problem with that, they actually sell that as a separate harness connector, which usually means that they actually have a problem with it. There's the terminal test tool as well. So you actually go in, you have some pin issues, and then it would cause a code on these trucks. And if you would go through it normally, I believe you end up doing something else that is not related to that, and it end up causing other problems down the road. So that's just a few off the top, a few different things. I think a couple of those are definitely not intuitive if you don't work on those. Now for some OEM specific scan tool functions that we have in here as well. So a couple engine related tests. So for example, crank position variation learn. That's not 100% unique, but just kind of the way it works is different than other manufacturers. EVAP service bay test, that one's very common. And it also requires definitely certain parameters to be followed in order to make that happen. Oxygen sensor heater learn, like we said, not 100% unique, but there's only a couple brands that do it. Brake pedal position sensor learn, for sure, you got to go into two different modules. And automated injector balance tests. There's other injector balance tests on other manufacturers, but just the way that one works for GM is unique to how it would work for other manufacturers. Transmission related tests. One good example is a fast learn adapt process. So instead of taking a longer time to relearn adaptations after transmission work, this is a fast learn. Other tests that are, for example, and these seem to be brake related, automated brake bleed, and then the rear caliper piston retract and extend, and that kind of relates to the Equinox, right? You want to make sure that there is less than half a master cylinder full in there. Those are our tips for when you work on GM vehicles. If you'd like more tips for other makes, you can find them listed right here on our Snap-on Diagnostics YouTube channel.